Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching the first episode of The Right Questions. My name is Ashley, and I am the host for The Right Questions. I am also the founder of Back the Blue Events, which is a nonprofit organization that supports police officers, first responders, and promotes positive community interaction. So, again, thank you for being here with me tonight. I just got some bad news due to an emergency. Our guest speaker for the evening, Tom McCullough, will not be able to make it. But I'm wishing him the best in the situation that he's dealing with right now. Unfortunately, when you're running for a political office, sometimes things happen that we wish didn't. But in this case, it did happen to him. So, but I'm sure that we'll be hearing more about that later. That is not my story to tell. So again, thank you for being here with me today. So what we're going to do is, instead of the normal forecast, I'm going to kind of break down how the show is going to go, in the next episode, considering this one, we can't do it exactly how we had intended to. So where we would normally have a guest speaker with us, that half hour would be the first part of the show. Unfortunately, again, that we can't do that tonight. So we're going to bypass that. So the first half hour is going to be an opportunity for me to ask, questions of the guests, kind of break down, some of the questions that we wish people would ask, but they don't, and get some of the answers that we wish we had that we haven't been getting. And then after that, I'm going to go to some hot topics. Some of them are local, some of them are nationwide. And then we'll have the comments running. So I'll be able to answer some of the comments from people who are watching the live stream, which that's up right now. So if anybody wants to comment as we're going, I'll be able to answer those because we don't have a guest speaker going. So I'll have a little more opportunity for that. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to go over. Some of them are really awesome, and some of them are a little sad. So we're going to get the sad part out of the way, and I'm going to be reading from this. So as you guys know, my nonprofit supports police officers, and unfortunately, we have lost a few. So I want to send my thoughts and prayers to the family and to the precinct of Officer Sergeant Harold Preston, who was shot and killed in Houston, Texas. And also an officer was injured. That would be Courtney Waller. They were sent on a call to a domestic dispute, which they tried for over an hour to rectify the situation and make sure that everybody ended up safe. Unfortunately, it didn't end that way. The assailant who was originally called upon in this situation did have a firearm, and he shot and killed one officer and injured another. There were some other injuries, but those are the ones that I wanted to discuss. So thoughts and prayers to Houston, Texas, and to the sergeant's family. And then unfortunately also Manchester PD Captain Chris Patterson. Our thoughts and prayers to that precinct and to his family as well. Unfortunately, he committed suicide. And this is something that's really heartbreaking for me because I would hope and wish that those kinds of things did not happen. Unfortunately, for many first responders, this is something that is more common than we wish that we, had to say that it was common. But there are so many resources out there. So to any police officers, first responders, family members that are watching this, please reach out to us at backtheblueevents@gmail.com. We will help you find the resources in your area that you need and do anything that we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. Also, I'm going to turn this on right now. So this is the information for Back the Blue Events. So any proceeds from this channel are going to be donated to the nonprofit so that they go back to helping police officers, first responders, and community members that are injured or the victim of violent acts in their community. So these are all really great things that, we're trying to promote and make sure, are helping. So now on to some fun local things. We are promoting something that's coming up this Friday. It is called the GOP Jamboree. We have had one, and it was an amazing success and so much fun. It was a really great time. So this time we are going to have John Canzera, who is the president of the FOP, the Seventh Lodge. a great guy. Just recently saw him at another event. He is so pro police, and he's doing a wonderful job to make sure that they're getting the support that they need. We will have Ann Dorn, whose husband, unfortunately, retired officer David Dorn, was killed in the St. Louis riots. He was a wonderful man who was just trying to help make sure that his friend's store stayed secure during those riots. And unfortunately lost his life in doing so. So she's going to be an advocate for that. She's an amazing person. She was at the White House, the RNC, and she spoke there, and she was amazing to watch. So definitely, if you can make it out this Friday to Homer Glen to Kono Farm, 5:30 to 10:30, the GOP Jamboree. It's going to be great fun. Tickets, if you buy them online ahead of time, are only $20. For kids, it's even less. And if you buy them at the door, they're $35, and they're still less for kids. So I'm telling you, it's totally worth it. Bryson Gray, Milk and Cooks, and just really great people to hang out and have fun with. So totally worth your time. And then the day after, I'm telling you, this is going to be a busy weekend for this gal, because we are heading to Springfield in the biggest, longest Trump train that Illinois has had thus far, mile-wise. So the large Trump train is going to be starting in Woodstock, and it is going to be going all the way down to Springfield to the Capitol building, where we'll be having a rally there. Got some great guest speakers that are coming. Allison Salinas is running for state senate. She's going to be our keynote speaker. We've got Mike Hellywood, who is an advocate for Save the Children, a great guy, awesome to listen to. I'm going to be speaking there, and we also have some other advocates for, Back the Blue. So it's going to be a great time. Also, for who will be speaking and doing the opening prayer is Pastor Steve Castle, who he actually was the first person to sue Pritzker to get the churches back open, which I applaud him, and I'm blessed to know him. He's a wonderful man who advocates for not just his parishioners, but the citizens of Illinois, who should have the right, to worship how they choose and to be out as they choose. So finger in the eye to Pritzker. So let's see. I'm looking at my list because this is the first episode and I'm still learning, and I want to make sure I tell you guys about all the great things that we've got coming up. Oh, here's another one. So this is going to be really exciting. So this is the premiere. This is our first episode. Now, next Tuesday is election day. So that is going to be a huge day, and I'm actually going to be speaking at an event. So how that one is going to work is we're going to have a lot of different representatives at this place called Scooters. And we are going to be at Scooters. So I'm going to be able to do some lives and be able to introduce a few different representatives that are going to be at that event. And you guys are going to get to hear me speak live at the event as well. So we're going to have someone having the live camera while I'm up there speaking in the microphone. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely tune in to that if you want a little bit of a break from, the nail biting of the election itself, because Lord knows how that's going to go. All we can do is just, hope and pray things go in the right direction, hopefully. Also tomorrow, it's not going to be live, but I am going to do a quick video that I'm going to put up on the channel for Allison Salinas, who is helping with the Trump rally. So it's going to be great. Like I said, she's an awesome person, got a lot of great things to say. And the other thing is that part of what I love about being able to do my own channel and have my own show is that I feel like you don't get enough attention when it comes to getting to ask those questions and be more involved. So I want to hear from the people who are going to be watching. If you have questions, if you have something that you want to ask your local representatives, or you want me to put it out there to the cosmos, and we'll see if some of the larger heads out there don't see it and maybe give us some answers, put them up there. It never hurts for me to ask or even try to answer myself, which is part of what I'm going to do tonight. Since our guest speaker is not available, I'm going to tell you guys some of the questions that I would have been asking, so you guys can kind of get a feel for how this is going to work when there's someone else on the guest speaker with me. Figured that'd be a good way to go with this. So yeah, definitely make sure you are putting stuff in that comment box, letting me know what you guys want to hear, because that is the important part. So if Tom was here, I'm going to read you some of the questions that I would have been asking him, and I'll give you kind of a little bit of insight as to what I think about some of these questions. So, just to give you a little bit of information about Tom, he is running for Illinois Senate in the 49th district, and he is very active with making sure that people are moving in the right direction when it comes to, some of the ideals that he has. So, and one of the other things that he has is he is a vice president of Canines for Veterans. So he does some amazing things for our veterans. So I definitely support Tom. And like I said, I wish him well with everything that he's dealing with tonight. It's very unfortunate. So here's some of the questions that I would have been asking him. And like I said, I have no fear of looking down at this time because this is my first shot at this. So you guys are just going to have to bear with me a little bit. Okay, so how do we feel about Pritzker trying to put us back on lockdown? I think we all know the answer to that question. This is a big no. Nobody wants to go back on lockdown. Nobody feels that this is necessary. And if you want my personal opinion, I think a lot of it is because he's just trying to tank the economy and make things as horrible as possible before the election so that they can blame it on Trump. But that's just, personal opinion there. Let's see. Well, I was going to ask him about Blago because that's an interesting story, but it's not my story to tell, so I can't really ask anything about Blago or answer for it. Mask wearing. So this is one of the things that I was going to ask him about is mask wearing, how he feels about different people, and this forcefulness of to or not to mask. I personally feel like this is one of those things where I can get behind personal choice. If you have the choice to do something, you should be allowed to do it. And, nobody should give you a hard time for that. If you want to wear a mask because it makes you feel better, then wear your mask. But if someone chooses not to wear a mask, then if your mask is keeping you safe, why do you care if they're wearing a mask? Kind of thing. That, and it's gotten to the point where it makes no sense because if you go to a restaurant and you have to wear a mask from the door to the table, but then you sit down at a table and there's an air conditioning unit that's filtering air, you're not really doing, you know what I mean? That's just more, to me, if you're going out of your way for social graces, then this shouldn't be a political issue. It should be a social issue. So, that's all I got to say about that. Tom was pro-police even when masks were polling better. And at this point, he still holds to that, which I have an extreme respect for him for, because it's not always easy to be pro-police, even though they risk their lives every day for ours. So big kudos to him for that. One of the things that I was going to ask him about, and it's a really important subject to me, is how do you think that defunding the police is not only going to affect the average citizen, but how is it going to affect other first responders? This is something that people aren't really thinking about. So what I mean by that is that we know that by defunding the police, and we've seen it, this isn't something we haven't had a trial run for. Minneapolis gave us the opportunity to see what happens. Crime goes up when you defund the police. Crime goes up. There's no question of that. We've witnessed it happen. Now, one of the things that we haven't taken into consideration is how that affects the community because of how it affects first responders. What people aren't thinking of is that in, say, a situation to where someone has a drug overdose and you call 911, obviously there's an expectation of an ambulance to come. An ambulance typically does not engage unless the police are there outside of certain emergency situations, because ambulances, they carry certain drugs, they carry certain things in that ambulance that if they got in the wrong hands could be used for drug abuse purposes, or they could be used to hurt somebody. So as someone who has taken the time to go out and have that conversation with other first responders, even firefighters who get called to certain situations because someone who Like it could even be a child was left home when they shouldn't have been and they turn on the gas, and you don't know who else might be in the house. You don't know what's going on with the situation. They depend on those police officers to be there to keep them safe while they're doing their job as well. So you're running the risk of potentially having other first responders not wanting to engage with citizens because they don't have those officers there to keep them safe. So these are all things that are should be taken into consideration and should be put potential stop gaps. You can't just defund or take something away when you're not considering all the different ways that they affect people's lives. It's just very dangerous and it's very stupid. So, at least in my opinion, I better state that real quick because, people don't like those kinds of words. So there's one of them. Let's see. How do we feel about reopening school districts? Okay, school, huge topic. Something that's affecting a lot of different people, even people who don't have children, because those children that they don't have that are out running the streets because, parents have to go to work. They're not doing their e-learning. They're just running out of the house, and it's very hard for people to control. There are so many aspects of this that are harming the children, the parents, and the other community members who are dealing with the backlash of children not being in school. School is not just the education of ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. School teaches children how to act in social environments, problem solving, social etiquette, hygiene, because Lord knows I have 2 teenage boys that sit at the house and don't think they have to shower because they don't have to be around people. And I'm like, no, you have to shower. So these are all things that, I know it sounds kind of funny when I say it like that, but these are all things that children learn because they have to socially interact. Also, dealing with adults. If kids don't deal with any adults other than their parents, who they should respect, how are they going to learn how to interact with older adults and learn how to treat them respectfully, but also be their own individual people and be able to speak up for themselves appropriately? There's a way that children learn to do that. And when you take away all of those civil interactions, you're damaging them. They're not learning how to grow into proper adults, and they will suffer for that, as well as the rest of society will suffer for that, because we won't know how to deal with them, because they won't know how to deal with themselves. You have kids that are now coming out on social media, and even elderly people holding signs saying that they would rather die than be kept on COVID restrictions. And that's kind of hard to argue, considering the fact that COVID, while it is a virus and it is dangerous, to a certain respect, if you have certain pre-existing conditions, to a majority of children and healthy people and even healthy elderly people is survivable, in the same way that a flu or an infection would be survivable. So even children have the logic of, if I'm more than likely not going to die from this, it's hard to tell them no, that they can't live a relatively normal life. And it's sad, as a parent, when you have to have that fight for your children just to try to make sure that they can maintain some semblance of civil normalcy. No, I'm reading the comments, and no, unfortunately, Tom will not be making it tonight. I wish that he could, but he had an emergency. So I'm kind of just going over some of the questions that I would have been asking him. So now we've gone past the mat. Okay. Do we think basic cleaning enforcement will be acceptable in schools if children were wearing masks? I absolutely do. I think that we're actually missing an opportunity to teach children how to be more hygienic, by not just allowing them to wear masks, have extra hand sanitizers about, have them wiping down desks and doorknobs, washing their hands more often. There are many, many things that we could be doing, so that children could still be in school, having some semblance of normalcy, and while also learning to just be more hygienically inclined and respectful to one another's physical space. I don't see how that could be a problem either, teaching children how to just be more respectful of people physically. That just seems like common sense to me. This is one that I was really interested in, and I hope that I get the opportunity to either ask him or a different representative. Do you feel that class itinerary disclosure should be an option, and that parents who don't agree with an itinerary that their children are being exposed to should have options. Now, what this means is we've all heard this on different news aspects about how people are seeing things that their children are learning and they don't agree with them, or that there are teachers out there that are trying to force parents not to listen to their class itineraries while they're teaching students. And obviously, as a parent, that's going to send off some pretty big warning bells when a teacher says, "Hey, I don't want you to listen to what you're teaching my child." I can't imagine that any parent would want to agree to that. And it would kind of make them want to listen even more at that point to try to find out what was going on with their children. So I feel as though, whether there was COVID issues or not, at this point, I feel as though it has almost become a necessity for whatever our children are learning. I feel as though parents should be given a breakdown of class syllabus at the beginning of every year to want to know, okay, what are you teaching my child? And just the basics, you know what I mean? Especially when, science, math, there's certain things that are pretty standard. But things like history, things like sex education, physical education, and what, those things entail, those should be things I definitely feel like they should have to let you know what they're teaching our children. And I think that we should have an option to opt out of certain things. I, for one, feel as though when it comes to sex education, it is a big one for a lot of parents. And it's important because while I have the view of children should feel comfortable in expression of their sexuality to a certain extent and should be allowed to ask questions, because you have to ask questions to get answers, I do have the conservative view of, why can't we just start the conversation with telling children that your body is precious, you only get one of them, and you should respect it. And once that foundation has been set, then you can start teaching them as they grow and have the mindset to be even capable of understanding what the rest of it means, that we can teach them to respect their ideals of how they want to grow and expand as adults. I think that there's a way that we can go about this that's responsible, that it's meaningful, that it's, like I said, that it teaches children respect for themselves and for others, and that does not inhibit the ability to ask questions to find, so that children can figure out who they really are and who they want to be without social pressure. I feel as though there's a lot of pressure on children to hold to certain ideals because it's the ideas that other people want or other people are telling them that they should feel. That's the antithesis of freedom of perception and freedom of ability to be oneself. So I'm a little off on that idea that I've seen coming out of different classrooms. But this is one I really would, if there's parents out there or even people who aren't parents, if you have an opinion on this, please comment to me, because I really am interested to know how people feel about that. So in conclusion, I am all for openness and exposure of class syllabus and what's happening in the educational system. And I think that parents should definitely have a voice for that. And should school boards be held to a higher accountability and standard for what's happening with that? Absolutely. I don't think that school boards should be something where they just meet up once a month and say, we're going to do this, this, and that with money. But we're not going to make sure that we aren't being held more accountable to the parents and the students, and looking at, the overall of what's happening with those students. I think it's very important. And here we get into some of the deeper questions socially. This is where we would have turned with Tom. Between COVID and racially charged tensions keeping young people apart, what advice would you give them to help bridge those gaps? So we have an entire generation of young people that was learning to come into their own, that not only are being kept apart by COVID, but they're also, in essence, being kept apart by this racial pressure that we're seeing in the media and across the country. And it's affecting them differently. And again, from having conversations with children of all different races, of all different mixtures and different backgrounds, the effect that it's having is negative, but for each one of them, it's happening in a different kind of negative way that we need to be addressing. And again, I'm going to be very blatant, because that's what needs to happen when we're answering these kinds of questions or having these kinds of discussions. For white children, you have this idea of, well, I've grown up all of this time, and up until, 6 months to a year ago, I had no idea that I was racist. I thought that I loved all of my friends, and I thought I loved all of these people equally because nobody ever told me any different. So these children are trying to come to terms with one section telling them that they're somehow inherently racist, and then another that's telling them, no, that's not true, that's just people trying to make you feel bad and have white guilt. That's a terrible place to be. So there's one faction. And then you have African American or Black or brown children who, some of them are they're very racially charged and have a mentality of, they feel as though they've somehow been racially biased against, even if they can't give an exact instance. They agree with the idea of, it's just inherent. People are just racist against them because they're Black or they're brown. And then you have other ones that are like, well, I never experienced this. But now I'm scared because people are telling me that I should be scared, but I don't really know what I'm scared of, or if I should be scared of these people, because I have all of these different nationalities around me that that I haven't experienced this with. So there's a lot of confusion in that respect, or a lot of animosity for something that is not being addressed in my mind appropriately. And then you've got these kids in the middle. And these kids in the middle are kind of the mixture of different nationalities or biracial children who have one parent that might be white and one parent that might be of another ethnicity, that kind of get stuck in this space between, where they don't know if they're supposed to be having to make a choice, if somehow their parents just happen to be the lucky different ones that happen to somehow overcome racial bias. There's a lot of confusion there too. So you have an entire generation of children who are all struggling, trying to find their way in the world, who really don't hate each other, who really don't dislike each other for any reason, but they've got this adult world that's supposed to be nurturing them and creating, good, decent human beings as adults as well, somehow giving them this mixed message of, either you're really racist and you just don't even know it, or you're not, and the rest of the world is just this terrible place that's going to try to make you into something that you're not. How do you fix that? How do you fix that? I'm still struggling with the answers to that question, because I tell my own children and I tell other children that that God is love, and I can't speak for everyone, but regardless of your skin color, you're loved by me. I'll do my best to nurture and to promote anyone's, self-esteem and self-respect, and the idea that I don't believe in being colorblind. I believe that color is beautiful, and I see all of them. I don't care what skin tone your color is. I'm looking kind of pale in this one, but I do have a bit of a tan because I am half Mexican, so I tan pretty good in the summer. But we're all created to be exactly how we look, so we should celebrate those colors and those differences. So I always tell kids all the time, you're beautiful no matter what color you are. You don't have to be blind to it. You celebrate each other. That's how you do it. That doesn't necessarily, mean that you can't just be as pale and pasty white as you want to be, or as dark as you want to be. Nothing's better or worse. They're just beautiful because they're different. So why can't we just celebrate, culture and differences, and enjoy each other? I don't get that, but that's the kind of idea that I try to bring. That's my answer to that question. But again, if anybody else has a better one, or if we can give each other tips as to how we can have that conversation with young people, and maybe even adults who need to hear that. Maybe there's some adults out there that just need to hear, that you're beautiful and precious in God's eyes, or whoever, you need to hear you're beautiful and precious to you. Maybe we need to get that some adults too. Maybe that'll help. So do we think that racial inequality is a divide that was pushed for media and political agenda? Personally, I absolutely think that's what it is. Because as a bicultural person, I didn't realize that racism was a huge problem until, I would say, the last 6 to 8 months. All of a sudden, it just got hugely perpetuated. And I know there's going to be some people out there that say, George Floyd, what happened to that man was a tragedy that should never have happened. that officer should not have knelt on his neck the way that he did, and I'll be the first one to say it. That man, that individual, was wrong for what he did and for the procedure that he partook. That does not necessarily mean that every police officer is bad, just like not every teacher is bad, just like not every nurse or doctor is bad, because all of them make mistakes in their profession and people have died from them. So, that being said, I would never blame every police officer for the issue of one police officer, or even for the percentage, because I've looked at the statistics, and racism is not a factor in policing, not the way that it's been perpetuated by the media or by other organizations that want to use that for their incentive or their gain. And the media is terribly guilty of that. They're looking for ratings. They, while the riots were cool to watch and everybody was watching them, you saw it all over the news. And then once people got sick of watching their cities being torn apart, all of a sudden you didn't see them anymore. There's a reason for that. And I believe that the media and the politicians need to be held accountable for what they've done to our society. But again, just personal opinion. And again, you don't have to agree with me. If you guys have comments, or you want to have this conversation, put it in the comment box, send me an email. We can definitely do that. What are some ways to reestablish the bonds that have been broken in the United States? Not just racially at this point, but politically, with families. COVID is an argument that one person in your family wants to wear masks, one person doesn't. One person wants to vote for Biden and feels like race hate is a huge thing. Some people don't, and they want to vote for Trump. So how do we basically overcome all of the things that our society has had to deal with and find some common ground again? At this point, the only answer that I've come up with is just continuing to be that voice of reason and try to continue to have the conversation. That's all we can really do at this point, is try to say, look, let's find some common sense ways of seeing everybody's point and aspect, and what can we fix, and what do we just have to admit has been lost to history, and we just need to do better in the future. Because there's some things you cannot fix. You can't change history. You can't change things that have already happened. The only thing that you can do is work towards a better future. That doesn't mean you don't acknowledge those things. You acknowledge that they happened, and you respect them for what they caused and what they've done, and how they may have changed people or situations. I am not one to say that we should ever forget history, but quite the contrary. I felt as though a lot of the statues that got pulled down should have stayed up for that exact reason, because when you fall asleep on a subject or you forget that it happened, history tends to repeat itself. And we need to be very aware of the mistakes, the pros and the cons that this country has made, so that we don't make the same mistakes, but that we continue to do the good that we're capable of doing. I think that's very important. So I was going to ask Tom if he would speak against potential legislation in his district if they try to raise taxes to pay for the huge bill that will be coming across the state to pay for all the damage that was done this year during the riots. Because it will cost upwards of millions, perhaps billions of dollars. We know that everybody who's listened to the news has heard some figure thrown about for what it's going to cost to cover the damages across the state, mostly in Chicago, for the damage that was done during the riots. Now, we've lost so many businesses, and there's many of them, some of the larger businesses and corporations, that have said they will not come back to Chicago. They will no longer be gracing the Mag Mile. And that's a huge problem, because that's where we get a lot of the revenue that would have maybe potentially been able to pay for some of the damages that we've had, but those won't be there anymore. And now Lightfoot was just on the news saying that she's going to try to pass a huge tax bill for the people of Chicago to try to gap this huge deficit that has now been created because of those riots. But Chicago cannot do it alone. She could throw all of these millions in property taxes and all these other things, and people just won't pay it. They'll just leave, and they know that. So there has been proposals to upward state tax across the state to try to help to bridge that deficit. Now, I personally don't feel as though my taxes on products should go up because of something that I had nothing to do with. A riot that I did not partake in and actually documented for posterity. So I pray God that that never happens again. But how do the rest of you feel? Do you guys want to see your taxes go up for things that you didn't do, crimes that you didn't commit in a place that you potentially didn't even live? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And if it's a way to try to get the federal government to step in to pay for those bills, I got to say I don't see that happening. I mean, maybe potentially if, God forbid, Biden wins the election, but I don't see that being something that the more conservatives are going to do to just fix, put a band-aid on people's mistakes. But that's just my opinion. But I'd like to know what you guys think about that. So how are you feeling about potentially, paying more taxes to fix somebody else busting up windows and burning down buildings? It's kind of a big one. So that's pretty much where I planned on ending it at that point with his questions. That was about a half an hour worth of questions that I would have been asking him. So that kind of gives you an idea of the questions that you're going to be hearing. Now, obviously, this would have gone on a little bit longer because we would have been bantering back and forth and more questions would have come out of that. But this time it's just me talking. So it was a little bit shorter. So shows are going to be about an hour. And next week, it will definitely be hitting an hour, maybe even a bit more, because like I said, we're going to have more representatives because we're going to be live at an actual event. So you guys are going to get to hear more people talk than just me. And you'll get to see me on stage, like I said, talking into the microphone, telling you about some things. But even though tonight didn't work out the way that I had anticipated, I'm really excited about it. I'm really, really interested to see more of the comments that, I'm going to get to see from you guys. And actually, before we head out, I'm going to go over those now. I'm going to look through some of these comments so I can see what's been said and if there's anything that I can answer now or if I have to do some research first. Okay. So, yes. Okay. So now that everybody knows it. So this is one of the reasons that Tom couldn't be on tonight. So Tom's Facebook was just deleted. He had just put out a massive amount of money in advertising on Facebook because it's a way a lot of people get to know each other, get to know about him is through social media. Facebook deleted him and all of his advertising. So you've got about $30,000 worth of advertising that just went down the toilet and they won't give him a reason why. So all of his contacts that he was affiliated with through Facebook were gone as well. So he is working rampantly to try to fix this issue. And if they will not give him a reason why it was deleted, we're going to see if we can help him take further actions with that. So that's why Tom could not be here tonight. That just happened. And I really hope that he can get this worked out. We totally support him with that. Nobody wants to go back on lockdown. I absolutely agree. I don't know anybody who thinks that that's a good idea to go back on lockdown. Yeah, CDC has definitely been very wishy-washy with whether masks are a good thing or not. Let's see. Thank you, Dawn, for appreciating the questions. I really did try to get a rounded group of questions that I would have been asking Tom. But if you guys want to research Tom and you have some more questions, I can give those to him. We can go over them. Like I said, hopefully he'll be able to come in on the next episode. You guys are going to see him next Tuesday because he's going to be at the event. It's actually his event that I'm going to be speaking at. So we'll definitely have the opportunity to ask him some of the questions that either we didn't get to ask him tonight or will be new questions that we'll be able to get back to him next time. Let's see. Say no to the tax bill. I absolutely agree. No to the new tax bill. It is not a fair tax. It is a lie. It's a very blatant lie. And it is not one that I agree with. Again, everybody has the right to vote for their choice of political candidate and the bills that we think are going to best benefit. However, I do not believe that the new fair tax is a bill that will benefit anybody. So thank you so much for putting some of those comments in. I'm glad that I was able to look at them. And thank you so much for being here with me tonight for my premiere show. Like I said, this is the first time that I will have ever been running my own show. I've only been on other people's. So I plan on making it better and better as the days go by. We're going to have some great guest appearances lined up. This is just the beginning. So we will see you guys next Tuesday, either at Scooters if you plan on coming, or we will see you as we are streaming live. You guys have a great night, and thank you again.